All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. This is our third and final race recap with Meaghan Hackinen in her whirlwind year of taking on each of the three infamous mountain races, totaling over 4,083 brutal kilometers in 18 days, 12 hours, and 36 minutes. Whew. My name is Taylor Kirkwhite, and I'm a part of our small but mighty customer service team here at Redshift. So if you reach out to us with compatibility questions or warranty concerns, I may be one of the folks that you're working with. Today, we are hearing from Meaghan about the Silk Road Mountain Race in Kyrgyzstan. If you haven't already, check out Redshift Sports YouTube channel to catch our previous two conversations with Meaghan, where she covers in gripping detail her experience at the Atlas and Hellenic Mountain Races. So Meaghan is not only a multi-time world champion cyclist and the first woman ever to complete all three mountain races in a single season, but she's also an absolutely incredible storyteller. So it's a great way to spend a lunch break or pass some miles and wonder while you're out on a ride. So go check those conversations out. And can't wait to hear from you today, Meaghan, about the Silk Road Mountain Race and just hear a little bit of reflection about, all three races in a single season. So maybe we can just kind of kick things off and hear a little bit about what inspired you to take on this Triple Crown.
Thanks for having me here, Taylor, and thanks for doing the math on how long I was out there for and the mileage. It's cool to see that all put together. I turned 40 this year, and I was kind of inspired by this big birthday to swing big, do something even larger than I've done before. In 2024, I did the Tour Divide, so that's kind of a hard one to top, but the mountain races definitely did it. Not quite as much distance, but longer time out there, three countries, more varied terrain. I really wanted to challenge myself because I'm competitive, but I also wanted to be like a contributing force in the growing and dynamic women's field. And, in bike pack racing, we've seen the women's field grow. It's been exciting to be part of that community and that competition. The Mountain Race Series dedicates equal coverage to men and women. So it was cool to get some good media coverage as well, I guess. I'm really excited that I committed myself to the season, and it feels great to wrap things up in this position.
That's incredible. We've really loved seeing you be a part of the, global conversation too about the women's field growing and inspiring people and really making an impact. So thank you. Without further ado, let's jump in.
For sure. So I'm going to present a screen share. I have a few slides, I guess, to show, and then we will jump into some more questions.
Yeah, pictures are part of the fun.
Pictures are part of the fun. Right on.
I always look forward to this part.
Yeah. So let me see. Okay, can you see that?
Looks great.
Okay. Yeah, great. We have like a skull of a bighorn sheep. So I'm going to bring you up to speed on the first two mountain races before we move into Silk Road, and then some Triple Crown kind of highlights and questions.
Awesome.
The first race of the year was Atlas Mountain Race. This took place in February. So it kind of pulled me out of the deep Canadian winter and into the heat of Morocco. It was 1,300K, covered 21,000 meters of elevation. And the route goes from Marrakesh to Essaouira. It was a really challenging race for me. I came in with a shoulder injury and a new bike, which was amazing, but I wasn't quite fit to me yet. So I suffered a bit of pain. And I think that was my main opponent during the race, was just kind of coming to terms with this pain. Incredible sceneries. I felt like I was on Mars. And then you get these little oases where there's palm trees and water and people living. And I was really motivated by the landscape to continue. This shot is one of the few paved sections on the route, and I included it because it's a great photo. But it's very much rocky roads and riverbeds. I placed second next to Mariah Moldenhauer, who had a standout performance and just raced with such grace and strength and power. Even if I was coming in at my best, I don't think I could have won that race, but I think I could have given Mariah a little bit more of a chase.
Amazing. It makes all the difference to have those, truly competitive folks that you can ride with, rival with, and then swap stories with afterwards. So I love that.
Yeah, ride with and rival with. Like, that's a great way of putting it. The next race of the season was the Hellenic Mountain Race. This takes place in Greece. It's about 3 months after Atlas. So I had time to start seeing a physio and just kind of addressing some of these issues that come up once you hit midlife. I felt a lot stronger, a lot more organized and confident coming into Hellenic. I was in Europe beforehand, helping out at a training camp in Europe or in Spain. I stayed with my coach in Switzerland, and then I flew over to Greece and toured from Athens to the start. This is the shortest race in the mountain race series. It's only 880 kilometers, but there's almost 30,000 meters of elevation gain, which is just a crap ton. If it's not up, it's down. There's no flat. I actually had a ton of fun in this race. I, improved my mountain bike skills a bit. I put flat bars on my cutthroat, and I just really committed to the challenge of doing something like pretty far from my comfort zone with the terrain. And I won the women's division, and I placed, I think, 9th overall. So that chase to be in the top 10 was so much fun for me near the end.
Yeah, it's incredible seeing these side by side. Like you did just as much climbing, just as much elevation gain in almost half the distance from the Atlas Mountain Race. Wow.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It's really, Nelson really outdid himself in creating this course, I would say. And
Wow.
there are these incredible stone bridges that you cross. And every time you get to one, you drop down into the valley, cross the bridge, and then start climbing up again. And there's got to be a more convenient way across. But this route was definitely more interesting, more historic, very low traffic, and beautiful, as you can see.
I love the idea of convenience playing a factor for anyone in designing these routes. What I also love about, you winning this race and your first win in this series, is how coming into the season, like the technical descending aspect was one that had kind of caused you the most hesitation. And I mean, you managed to overcome that to like achieve your first, at least,
Mhm.
results victory and overall top 10, which is so badass.
Thanks. Yeah, I really focused on the technical stuff in the time between Atlas and Hellenic, and it definitely paid off. So I think there's a good lesson there. Maybe addressing your weaknesses instead of hiding from them
Mm.
can yield results. The final race of the season, the kind of big daddy of them all, is the Silk Road Mountain Race. This was definitely the one I was most excited about, but also most anxious about. Um, it goes from Osh, the second largest city in Kyrgyzstan, to Karakol, which is kind of a smaller community in the mountains, bit of an outdoor hub for trekking and horseback riding and lake activities like fishing. It has pretty much the same elevation as the Hellenic Mountain Race, except over double the distance. So it's
Right.
definitely not as much climbing per kilometer. But to make up for that, the terrain's really rough. There's a lot more hiking. It takes place at altitude, much of it above 3,000 meters.
Wow.
The weather is way more severe. It was below zero almost every night that I was outside, very hot in the valleys. Um, Resupply is hard to find, difficult to find places to stay indoors. So I think all those challenges made up for maybe the lack of climbing. But I would say it makes it that legendary and
Mm.
challenging course that it is. So I'll jump into the bike check and tell you a little bit about what I was riding for Silk Road. This is very similar to my setup for the other races. I did a full bike check with Cameron Russell, who filmed and edited it. Thank you, Cameron. And it's up on Appy Dura's YouTube channel. So if you want to check out all the details and nerd out, go take a look at that. I raced all of the events this season on my 2025 Salsa Cutthroat Force with an Axis transmission. I have a 10 by 52 cassette in the back, and I have a 34 on the front. I raced a 34 in Atlas and a 30 in Hellenic, and I think I should have put a 30 or a 32 on for this race. So that's one of my mistakes, is putting too big of a chainring on front, because it isn't as there isn't as much climbing, but some of the pitches are quite steep, and with the impacts of altitude and carrying more gear, I definitely wanted more gears. And yeah, I added a RockShot Sid Select 3P front suspension with 120 millimeters of travel. That was used for all the races. The wheels are by Light Bicycle. The tires are Fleecer Ridge, Rene Hurst Fleecer Ridge 2.2 inch tires. I'm using the K-Lite Ultra, and it's paired with a dynamo hub in the front wheel. I've got the little K-Lite Cube blinky light, as well as the micro USB charger to keep my electronics charged. Yes. For comfort and to reduce fatigue, you can see that I have the Redshift Sports Shock Stop Pro Race Suspension Seat Post. There's a lot of washboards and rough descent, and over such a long and taxing race, I really wanted to prioritize self-care in any way that I could. So I think the suspension seat post really paid off in the second half of the course, when my body was, starting to get more fatigued, and I was just able to kind of go harder than I would have been able to go if I had been, beating myself up even more. It's just such a long race. Like I said, you want to do everything you can to kind of take care of your body, take care of your bike. And I felt like the seat post definitely helped with preserving my strength and, and everything. For bags, I've got the Appy Dura Backcountry Series packs. This is the first time I've raced with a front roll, and I have my sleep kit in there. So for sleep kit, people are always curious about this one. I use the Rab Mythic Ultra 360 sleeping bag, rated to -8 Celsius, OR helium bivy bag, and a Nemo All Season inflatable sleeping pad with an R value to 5.4. I found this sufficient to sleep to -6 Celsius during the race with no discomfort. Really glad I had kind of a robust kit, even though I didn't bring a tent. And I was, just able to be comfortable when my water bottles were freezing at night. Wow. I have apparel from 7 Mesh, which includes my Tour Divide tested Sky Pilot jacket and Thunder pants. I wear the rain pants all the time because I was cold, and they just kind of kept me cozy. I also had 3 different pairs of socks. I am waterproof. I called them my river socks for water crossings. Thin pair of merino socks from 7 Mesh, and a thick pair of wool socks that I kept dry and I wore to bed. Sometimes I would put plastic bags on my feet if I was using the thin merino socks at night or in the morning to try and keep my feet a little drier. So again, prioritizing self-care. Here are some close-ups of the bike. This is me at the finish. I think it's kind of cool to show the bike all dirty and everything. Yeah. I will give a shout out to Kurt Wormby for that stem cap there. It says the only way is forward. It was a lovely gift, and I'm really happy to kind of have that to look at and inspire me. Before I raced, I arrived to Bishkek 2 weeks earlier, and I toured the Celestial Divide. That's a newer bikepacking route that goes between Bishkek and a little bit past Osh, where the race starts. It was a great way for me to acclimate to the elevation a bit and just get used to bikepacking in a different country. I was able to travel slower, enjoy food out, enjoy lots of time in my tent. I actually toured with a tent, and I think it was a great way to just kind of adjust without diving in head first. I met quite a few other bikepackers. I got to chat with locals and people on horses, and just had a really great time, and then had to shift into race mode.
Question on acclimating to the altitude. There is so much, diverse experience in how much time you need to like really acclimate. Some people say just go in raw overnight. It's better to like go in before your body starts to like really try to acclimate, and other people say like you need at least 3 weeks for your blood oxygen to whatever. And what was your experience with 2 weeks? Like how did that work for you?
I would say it was better than nothing. Going in completely raw. From the people I talked to, didn't have good experiences with
Yeah.
that. I think because it's such a long race. So maybe if you're doing a 1-day race or something, it might work out for you. But because it is so long and you're there day after day, a little acclimation is to me better than none.
Yep.
But so much of the race takes place above 3,000 meters, and I was only up at that altitude for kind of shorter periods of time. I would get to the top of a climb at 3,400, and then I would do all my stretches and like have lunch, and I tried to camp high as much as possible when I was touring, and then camp low when I was racing. And those two things didn't always work out. Sometimes when I was touring, I was like, well, I kind of want to get to town so I can get breakfast because I have no food left. And when I was racing, there are times where you're just high for pretty long periods, and I would decide to camp before I got any higher because I, didn't want the temperature to drop anymore. So you kind of have to go higher before you get over the peak and go low. If I was to do it again, I would probably do something similar. Yeah, maybe even spend 3 weeks. And spend some time in a place like Peak Lenin Base Camp, where you're up at like 3,700 meters, and you can just kind of have a home base and not necessarily be on the move all day. I think that would be a good way to do it too.
Cool.
I wanted to share this bridge as an example of some of the things I encountered touring that helped me tackle the unexpecteds in Silk Road.
No way.
Yeah, it looks like a movie set bridge, right? From like Indiana Jones. It was terrifying. But to be able to make a risk assessment, fortify myself, and get over it was something I had to do a lot during the race. And I got a little bit of practice with that touring.
Wait, so this was on the tour, not on the race, or both on the tour and the race?
It's on the tour and on a previous race route. So
okay, so it wasn't on the race route this year.
That's right. So I posted a photo on Instagram, and lots of people messaged me being like, oh my God, I have nightmares about this bridge still.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah. So we'll jump into the race. It started in Osh at 6 p.m. This is me and Eric House, a rider from Texas, I think, who completed all the mountain races this year on a single speed. So it was cool to see him again. Yeah, I'm sure he's got some stories. I think he had a lot of flats, actually. But it was cool to see these repeat riders as part of the bike pack community at every event. And Eric was one of them I got to see at each race. Leaving at 6 p.m. was just a trip. We had a police escort. There's 250 people leaving town. All the locals are on the streets videoing us. People are hanging out of cars and cheering us on. It was incredible. The 6 p.m. start meant that we missed some traffic, and it's very hot down in the valley. So we were heading out into the evening, which was nice, straight into like a 2,800 meter climb or something. It was my second largest climb on Strava after Haleakala and Maui. So it was huge.
Wow.
And I rode through the first night. This is the sun rising, incredible descent down to the valley, and then off to CP1, which is about 300K in at Peak Lenin Base Camp.
So kind of all according to plan up to that point, yeah?
Yeah, it was actually. I planned to ride through the first night, nap as needed. I didn't need to nap. The one funny thing that happened was that I wanted to stop to get water to resupply, and they didn't have any water. So I filled my hydration bladder with Pepsi, which is not what I wanted to do on day one. I wanted to save that kind of tainting the bladder, sugar high. Yeah, until later in the race when I really needed it, or when I stopped being able to eat food because my stomach was turned or something. So I was like, oh, we're doing this already? Like we're 14 hours in and we're putting Pepsi in our hydration bladder, like literally a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi. And it also, I guess, kind of showcases how limited some of the resupplies are. They're
Right.
not meant for tourists. The local people don't need to buy bottled water because their stomachs are adjusted to it.
Right.
In yeah, in retrospect, I should have asked if there was a tap, and I could have just filtered off the tap. But you're kind of just like, get the thing and go. So
Yeah. Yeah. You have like one mission, and it's to get back on the road as soon as possible. Wow. And you were
from
like one of the earliest riders coming through the checkpoint also. So, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, I think I was like around top 10, and I
Yeah.
felt pretty good to that point. But on arriving in the checkpoint, I think it took me 23 hours, and I was starting to feel the fatigue from not sleeping, as well as from the altitude because it's up at like 3,600 meters. And I got to the checkpoint. I had fallen into the river earlier that day, so maybe not quite going according to plan if I think harder about it. But I got my electronics wet, and then my phone wouldn't turn on. And I didn't know if it was from the river or it was being glitchy.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of on this mission to plug my phone into the wall to check that it worked. And it did work. It just crashed
Okay.
for some unrelated reason. And my electronics all worked. But after that, I took more care going through river crossings. I developed a better technique. And I also put my electronics in like a Ziploc bag so that they weren't they weren't at risk of getting wet if my full bags like dumped in. So kind of just taking those extra steps to be really safe. And when I crossed the river, I didn't keep my phone in my pocket anymore. I put it into the Ziploc bag in case I fell in, and I did fall in again. So I was glad I took those steps.
Nice. Learning on the fly. Great job.
Yeah. From checkpoint 1 to checkpoint 2, there's actually a 200-kilometer paved stretch, so it goes pretty quickly. I got some sleep, and I was in good spirits. This is one of my resupply snacks. The Stroop waffles were pretty yummy. Lots of sugar, lots of chocolate, lots of potato chips. They had these really cool signs when you go through some of the villages that I just thought were really interesting and intricate. And you're out in the middle of nowhere, and this community has like, very few people, and there's this big sign.
I love that.
Yeah. Kelsu takes place, or it's located kind of at the end of this valley by this lake, and it's this really beautiful, idyllic location for a checkpoint. It felt good to get there. En route was the famous or infamous 30-kilometer hike-a-bike. If you look hard in this photo, you can see Alex Kopp pushing his bike up a switchback. You might not see it, but it's kind of in the middle, or he's in the middle. This was something that Nelson Trees, the race director, gave us a lot of warning ahead of time and mentioned that it's kind of the only way to connect these two parts of the country. Well, there was another way, but it was a 60K hike-a-bike. So he was gentle on us and gave us the 30. And so, it was something we were aware of. You could plan for, bring more food, make choices around your shoes and how you're going to tackle it. The first 3 river crossings in the hike-a-bike were substantial, and you have to be very careful and consider time of day. I arrived in the morning, so the water rises throughout the day, and as the melt increases, and so people who got there in the evening or at night, I think, had deeper, scarier crossings. A lot of it is this. Almost all of it is this trail that's used to bring animals up and down the valley for like nomadic shepherds. And then the final few K are kind of in the riverbed itself. There's not a lot of water at that point, but it's stony and difficult to walk on. And then the final bit is just this like super, super steep pitch up to like 4,000 meters. And you're kind of taking 10 steps and then taking 10 breaths and then pushing your bike a little bit more. When he got to the top, I wasn't able to descend right away. So that's why I said 30 plus km, and I walked down, but it was such a relief to be walking down instead of up. It's a lot quicker. You're not really, you're not using your muscles the same way. And it was absolutely beautiful. As you can see, this is right up at the top. So I think that it was a really cool experience to undertake a 30-kilometer hike in an event like this. It was something I wasn't sure I could actually do. I've never hiked 30 kilometers in a single day, but it's definitely opened my eyes to what's possible in a bike race, in a bike adventure. And I think I'm going to do some hiking this fall without my bike.
Wow, inspired.
Yeah.
I love that.
From checkpoint 2 to Naren. So at the checkpoints, you get to eat some food and chat with the volunteers. That's me holding my brevet card and some of the yurts
So
outside.
fancy.
It is fancy, right? So
Oh,
I knew I would get to Naren, which is also known as Scratch City, pretty late at night. But I was really like, I had a game plan to get there and do kind of a reset and get my body and my shorts clean, get some good resupply for the 400-kilometer stretch without resupply that I was going into, and get a bit
wow.
more sleep indoors because I knew that this might be my second and last chance to sleep inside.
Wow.
I booked a hotel because it said it had 24-hour reception on booking.com. I sent them a note saying I would arrive after midnight, and they were all locked up and closed. And I called, I banged on the gate. I couldn't get in. It's 2 a.m. So I biked around, looking for another place, but it's mostly guest houses and they're not really very well labeled. So they're kind of, it's not like you're in, a city in the US or Canada where you can kind of see the reception signs or the hotel signs. There's better advertising, I would say, in North America. So I called a few places and no one called me back. And it was this fancy place here. And they said, yeah, you're welcome to come by. Here's our address. And I rolled in and she kind of, showed me the room, showed me the shower. And I did everything I could to get into bed and go to sleep quickly. But it was like 3:30 a.m. And
Wow.
so I couldn't get that much sleep without, waking up really late. So I did get to wash everything, and I did get to stay in this like ridiculous guest house, which was so much better than the alternative, which would have been like sleeping in a park and not washing my kit. So,
But even at 3:30 in the morning, after all of that, you're taking this smiling selfie, which I feel like just speaks to your spirit and the like need that you have on these adventures to just roll with the punches and like
mm,
laugh about all the setbacks, like laugh through it, I love that for you.
thanks. I've always been entertained by like absurdity, and I feel like
Mm.
ultras have a healthy dose of that, and you're living it. You're not observing it. You're like, this is happening to me. I am
That
the
like
character in the story.
really sums it up. Absolutely. Like it's like you can't go out there and not even seek the absurd. So that is, yeah, perfect
Yeah.
encapsulation.
The stretch from Naren to checkpoint 3 in Tamga was awesome. It was difficult. It was a longer stretch, but leaving Naren, it's beautiful riding through these valleys with little yurt camps and sheep and goats and well, they're not wild horses. But they're roaming free. There was a bridge out, and like the day before the race, one of the control cars recce'd out an alternate for us, which is just, I think, speaks to the level of, just the level of organization on the race team to be like, don't worry, we'll find a way around it. There was a bit more climbing, but it was all good. There's also a kind of a pretty challenging 200K loop en route to checkpoint 3, and you keep crossing this area called the Arabelle Plateau, which is maybe 3,800 meters, and it's high and exposed and cold. And I was always afraid of getting stuck up there in bad weather, but I got lucky. Other people got snow, so I think that kind of speaks to the level of chance in these races. You just don't know what you're going to get, and you have to be prepared for it all.
Mm-hmm.
From checkpoint 3 to the finish in Karakul was awesome, hard, challenging. You climb directly back up from the checkpoint to Tosar Pass, which is almost 2,900 meters. It's a long, slow but rideable climb. And then you head up this mining road to Juku Pass, where this main photo is from. There's also a sneaky little hiking trail that is in there that kind of caught a lot of riders by surprise. It took place right after the Bog March, which also took me by surprise, and just made this stretch a lot slower than I anticipated, which is fine. But it's like, okay, how much food do I have at this point? And I'm not making the target I thought I was going to make. So how can I readjust? And, where am I actually going to end up tonight? And I was always good for food. Water isn't a concern. So it's just kind of mentally being okay with being slow and being patient. And I'm usually pretty good, but, in the hiking stretch, I hit that in the evening. And it just gets a lot harder when you're on a hiking trail at night, trying to find your way with your bicycle. So, yeah, having patience and, remembering that everybody's doing this challenge together. You're not the only person who's being surprised by this. And again, these hiking trails and these difficult roads kind of link up a route that wouldn't be possible otherwise. And that, even though it's following the historic Silk Road trading route, and these routes are being used by local shepherds and stuff, in reality, not that many people have been there. Like, I live in Kelowna, and we have parks there that see, thousands and thousands of people every year. And it's not like that in these places. So it's pretty special to get there.
Yeah, that's a beautiful, beautiful perspective. I mean, I imagine that feeling that when you are so fatigued and you think you're getting a flat tire, you're like, there must be something wrong with my bike or equipment or the terrain, And so I imagine the difficulty in kind of sussing out, it's this hard for me. Is it this hard for everybody? Or and so I'm just imagining that mental moment and then being able to kind of snap out and have that perspective of like this incredible place that so few people have and will have the privilege to see and experience. Love that.
Yeah, you narrated that really well. I think a lot of it is navigating your own mind as well as the actual terrain.
For real.
This is one of the border military checkpoints in Eshkilatash. It's on the final finishing loop around Karakol. A lot of the finishing loop lies next to the Kazakh border, and there are these kind of border zones where you need to have permits to travel to. The race team took care of these permits for us, but when I got to this border checkpoint, they didn't seem to know about the event or have the permit information handy. And I probably would have gone by unnoticed, except my brakes were really loud because I had just been through some water. So I was like,
yeah.
And then somebody came running out to check my paperwork. And I was like, damn it, if only I could have been sneaky.
Yeah.
Should have gone for those quiet organic pads. But
oh my gosh. So how did you persuade your way through?
I know. I was, so I was a little bit stressed. I get nervous when I encounter authority figures, and this woman, didn't speak any English, and we were using the translate on my phone in Russian and English, and it kind of went back and forth for a bit. And then I was like, okay, like, can I use your Wi-Fi? And I'll contact the race director. And once I contacted Nelson, not Nathan, he sent me the paperwork that I needed to show her that was probably at the border control somewhere already. But anyways, she looked at it and, said, you're good to go. And she sent me on my way with like a handful of candy, which was very sweet because, she was being very like, firm and border official like before that. So it was
nice,
very
professional.
Very professional. So it's good to be sent on my way with a little treat.
Just another reminder of like there are perks and challenges of being one of the earlier riders coming through that checkpoint, right? Again, like many of the folks earlier may have snuck through, but there are like what it sounds like 240 riders potentially behind you that you may have saved a ton of effort.
Yeah, definitely. Having these conversations, like they're going to get through easier or quicker now that the paperwork is accessible. Right.
They didn't get the candy, so.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, there was no like candy bowl or anything, so I think I got a special treat. So there's one big final climb called Sean Ashu. It's not that big. It's only like 1,000 meters, but it's pretty rough in sections, and it takes you up to close to 4,000 meters again because you're starting high. And I got some snow there. I don't have any photos. I was too concerned with just getting through and like staying warm, and I didn't want to stop and lose my momentum taking any pictures. And I arrived at the finish in the evening around 10 p.m., pretty destroyed. And in my head, when I thought about getting to the end of the race, of the series, I was quite emotional. And, you know, but then I would tell myself, don't think about the finish, Meaghan, like live in the moment. My motto was right here, right now from that Fatboy Slim song. And so I kind of snap out of the finish line, you know, fantasy and get back into what I was doing. But when I finally got to the finish, I was just kind of like, cool, I made it. I'm here. Like I didn't really have the capacity or the energy to emote very much. And it was so amazing to see a crowd of other finishers, of dot watchers, of people who'd scratched and come to the finish. It was really special, but I felt like I couldn't like vocalize my appreciation. I just was like, oh, nice to see you guys. Like, so that's always kind of funny. I'll also note that this beer here, this Apna, it says 11%, but that's not alcohol content. It's only 4%. So we're not sitting around drinking 11% beers. Just FYI. I spent nearly a week in Karakol greeting other finishers. This is Sami Sari, who placed second. It was awesome to be there for her finish.
Wow.
Somebody gave me some flowers. Yeah. And I gave them to her and she left them at the finish. So all these people have photos with these awesome flowers. Really good vibes. They just rented like a residential property. People were kind of hanging out and chatting and swapping stories. So it was nice to be here for that long. Here are some of my key takeaways that I learned this season. The first is that your prep work pays off. Everything I did to get ready, you know, all the late night tinkering on the bike, all the thinking about which sleeping bag to buy, all of that pays off when you're racing, and you can turn your brain off a bit and just enjoy being out there in the landscape. But if you don't do that prep work, if you don't know what's coming, for me, I find I have more stress and anxiety. You know, you might not make the best kit decisions, and you might not have quite as positive an experience. For instance, I took my bike in to get serviced before the race. I had my fork like sent off and fully serviced. In Silk Road, I had 0 mechanicals. One only thing I happened is one of my little button batteries for my shifter died because I forgot to change it, and then I replaced it and my shifting went back to normal.
Nice.
That is the only mechanical I had. And other people, you know, were plagued by flats and had things break and stuff on them. And of course, some of that is chance, but some of it is also prep and servicing and taking care of your stuff beforehand so that you can kind of start with a pretty fresh bike and not have those issues.
And skill and choices that you make in the race. You can't underemphasize
That's true too.
that. Like the way that you ride, the finesse that you ride with can, you know, hugely be preventative of those mechanicals. So is it true? I'm trying to remember back. You didn't have a single flat?
I had one flat during Hellenic. Yeah. And I was able to
one single flat.
Yeah, I was able to cure it. I was able to fix it with just a tire plug and no issues after that.
That doctor came to pay a visit.
Yeah. But yeah, I kept that tire on until I swapped my tires out before each race. So I kept it on right until I came to Silk Road and I swapped them out.
Oh, nice. Oh, speaks to the prep too. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right, Taylor. And I think that riding, I don't want to say conservatively or cautiously, but being aware of what you're riding over and the water crossings, trying not to get your bike too wet. You know, the bikes aren't made to fall into rivers, and I dropped mine a couple times, but just trying to, you know, keep things dry, keep things clean. It's an impossible goal, but the better you do, the happier and healthier you and your bike are going to be. So
huge.
So the next thing, I learned a lot from using the same bike for 3 different races and adapting it from the bike that comes off the shelf. So I put that suspension fork on at the beginning of the season. I use that for all the races, but I changed my handlebars to flat bars for Hellenic. I changed my bag configuration a bit. I added that front roll for this race. After every race, I did kind of a postmortem and evaluated for my kit and myself what worked, what didn't work. What would I like to change? What do I need to change? What should I research? So I got to know my bike a lot better by, you know, riding and training on it for all these events. And it was kind of, fun to experiment with different things. You could have used different bikes for the different races and that would have worked as well. But like I said, I think I just learned a lot about my bike from using the same one. set realistic expectations. It's hard to know what you're getting into with each of these events. And I think the better you know yourself, the more you study the race manual and talk to people who've done the events, the better you'll be able to set your expectations. I think you can go in and say, like, I have no expectations for myself. I'm just there to see what happens, which is like a really cool attitude to have. It gets harder after you've done more events, but as a, you know, kind of a someone doing a race for the first time or something, that, you know, it's great to not have expectations for yourself. But I think that, you know, you do want to have expectations for how slow some sections are going to be, or, you know, for the weather and the temperatures for safety purposes. So it is useful to know what you're getting into, and like I said, to be realistic about like the temperature range and stuff. And sometimes we have a tendency to hope for the best when it comes to weather, but, you know, hope for the best, prepare for the worst, right? And just be safe and be prepared. Eat as much as you can. It's hard to compensate for all the calories you're losing, and you just want to find ways to do that, whether it's, you know, filling up at ice creams at the resupply, or putting Pepsi in your water bladder, or getting, you know, lots of sandwiches and packing them around with you. Finding strategies to get as many calories as possible is super important for all of these events. And I guarantee you, you will not eat as many calories as you're utilizing.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, chasing adventure, not rankings. I'm really motivated by the landscape, by discovering what's around that corner. And to me, I think that is a more, it's a healthier and more sustainable long-term motivator than rankings. I like doing well, and I am competitive, and I find the tracker does motivate me for sure. But I think the bigger motivator is, you know, the excitement of being in this landscape, being self-supported with minimal gear, and having to find my way through some of these challenging situations while there is a time pressure. I listened to a podcast with Robin Gremperle, who won the men's division. It was the one he did, as a race winner with the Silk Road Media team. And he talks a lot about kind of the adventure of the race, and how that motivates him as well. So, I agree with a lot that he said in the podcast, but adventure is what I'm after. So I would love to answer any other questions. I guess if you are in the audience and have questions, throw them in. And I think Taylor has some prepped up for me.
Yeah, we've collected a number of questions from folks following along and folks that have submitted them. So thank you to everyone kind of engaging and participating in that way. We really appreciate hearing from you. Let's see here. One question, let's see, it was Fred has asked, is would you be keen to repeat any of these races?
I think given some time, I would consider going back to all of them. Not necessarily in one season, but there's none that have like left me with lasting trauma bad enough that I would not return to. But I also don't feel like compelled to, you know, get back next year.
Totally. Well, speaking of next year, you know, after such a heroic Triple Crown, do you have an idea of what next year holds? Do you have any ambitious 41st birthday gifts to yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I can say that 41 is too young to retire. So I'm going to be racing again next year. And I have some unfinished business. So I'm going to return to a race in North America that's also pretty legendary, that I think that I could get a faster time at. People know my race history. You can probably guess at which one this is. And there's another race being added to the mountain race family, and I hope to sign up for that one. It takes place in Turkey, and I'd like to be able to do all four, not necessarily in 1 year, but I think it would be cool to do that one next year.
Oh, I love that. That's so exciting.
Yeah, and leaving a lot of time in my schedule for kind of like more Okanagan, Pacific Northwest based adventures. I love doing like epic day rides and setting out a ridiculous route and being like, can I get here, before I go to bed? Can I do this loop and still sleep in, the comfort of my own home tonight? So I hope to do some more of those challenges, because this year I spent a lot more time on prep and organization and taking care of my shoulder and, working on full body fitness. So I hope that I can spend more time kind of on epic day rides next year.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that with an undertaking this huge, a huge part of the training is really just like the logistics. And even though you're so focused on the adventure and like living in the moment with the experience, there's a lot of structure and just kind of like organized chaos that goes into like even getting to the start line of each of these 3 events.
Fully, yeah. It took me like almost a week to get to the start of Silk Road. I drove 4 hours from Kelowna to the Lower Mainland, stayed overnight with friends, got a ride to the airport, where I bought an air tag for my bike box en route. Took a flight to San Francisco, took a flight to Dubai, took a flight to Bishkek, and then my bike took 48 more hours to arrive. And then
Wow.
I packed up the bike and started touring. So I think I left my home Monday afternoon and my bike arrived on Saturday morning. So it was a long time in transit. Yes.
The like rolling with the punches muscle is just actively growing under strain there before the race even begins. What about someone new to the series, the mountain series? If they maybe weren't quite ready to take all 3 on in a given season, like where would you have them start? Where would you recommend? Which one should they take on?
If you like climbing, I would do Hellenic. It's a bit easier to get to. To me, I found it to be the most fun race. It might have been part of having really great prep for it, but I just really enjoyed the pitchy climbs and fast descents. And it was very clear when it was over my head and I had to walk, and I just didn't mind doing that. The temperatures are more moderate. In the first year, I know there was snow, but in general, I don't think it's as hot or as cold. And there's tons of water. There's shelters in the middle of nowhere that you can sleep under, so you don't have to bring as much sleep kit. It's still quite remote though, and it's not how you imagine Greece. So, it's not like a tame ultra. It's still pretty wild and exciting. If you're not as much of a climber, Atlas is I guess the other choice. But like personally, I found Atlas was amazing, but I found it to be a bit more, just a bit more difficult. It's a little bit longer. Culturally, it's a bit more challenging than Greece, I would say, but also like a very cool place to visit. So yeah, if you're a climber, go to Greece. If not, maybe Atlas. And if you're like craving the adventure of a lifetime and you can't get it out of your head, I guess sign up for Silk Road.
That kind of leads me into, you may have already answered this, but which event of the 3 challenged you the most and why?
I would definitely say Silk Road. In my mind, it was similar to the Tour Divide, except shorter and, like in Central Asia. But it was challenging in so many ways that I didn't quite expect. So, it takes place at altitudes higher than the Divide. I would say a lot of the Divide takes place around 2,000 meters. Here is more like 3,000. The surfaces are more difficult. They're rockier, they're rougher. There's probably 60 to 70 kilometers of hiking. So it's slower in many portions. I think I averaged like 275 kilometers a day in the Divide, and I did not average that here, and it wasn't for lack of trying. There is less resupply and less indoor shelters. So one thing I didn't do was stay in any yurt camps. sometimes folks are invited to stay in yurt camps if the weather is bad. And some yurt camps kind of are commercial and have, places for people to stay on that commercial basis. But other than that, there's really like nothing out there. There's no trees to shelter under. There's no buildings. There's like just open space. So you're just a lot more exposed if the weather rolls in at night, is what I'm saying. Or if if you get cold or you just want a break, there's no options. So that to me makes it quite different than the divide, where there's, kind of trees to shelter under, or little cabins, or you're dropping down into communities more frequently. And then again, coming from an English-speaking country, there's definitely challenges in Kyrgyzstan where there's not as much English spoken outside of the bigger cities, and using Translate is great and really useful, but it still makes communicating more complex topics a challenge. So,
yeah, it does it seem like your experience with Silk Road compared to the other two events? Is it fair to say it was lonelier as well? I know that you had a huge lead for much of the race this year in your field, but I didn't hear stories like I may have in the other two events where you're riding with other riders, or, had connected with other folks at aid stations or resupply areas.
I was on my own a lot more, but I wouldn't say I felt lonely. I felt pretty focused and like determined and content. But I was on my own a lot more. The first night I rode with a few people, which was pretty fun to kind of be swapping stories and just being like, I can't believe we're actually doing this.
Yeah.
And as the race progressed, I was on my own, I would say more and more. And sometimes I would bump into somebody in the evening and we'd chat a little bit. But yeah, I was definitely kind of in my own bubble in the field for much of it, which was something I guess I had prepared for with touring, because I was on my own there as well. And I listened to the Mountain Race podcast every day. So I was kind of being updated on what people were up to in the field and where folks were at. And so it was kind of an interesting way to connect that way. And then whenever I saw the media team, I would be like happy to see them, but they never really talk to you. They want you to talk to them. So and like sometimes I didn't feel like talking, so they would just get like video footage of me. So yeah, that's kind of those were funny interactions.
I love that. And then in contrast, I've heard you reflect about the importance of community in the mountain race series. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? What is the sense of community, given that this is such an individual pursuit in some ways?
Yeah, I think it actually takes place a lot at the start and at the finish, and online as well, being able to connect with people before the race, and see kind of what their plans are, and to talk a little bit about kit and share similar anxieties or whatever. And then when I was touring, I bumped into some racers. I spent a few days in Sari Mogul, where folks go for altitude acclimation, and just hung out with a bunch of other riders outside the only store eating ice cream. So I think that the coming together from around the world to compete in these events is something that's really special. And there are some folks that, as I mentioned, have kind of been repeat riders. I got to hang out with Carlotta Schumacher a bit after the race. We were both in Bishkek, and we were staying with two friends. And so she was with one and I was with the other. So we went for a big fish fry. We were going to go to the hot springs one day, but it was too late. So we went out for dinner somewhere. So it was kind of cool to, connect with her. And we're traveling to this location to compete in this race. But I would say for me, the community aspects happen around the race and not necessarily in it. But because we have this shared experience, we have a lot to connect over. And then the people who compete in these events, they're just interesting people with cool jobs and backgrounds and lives. So it's a real treat for me to get to know them outside, or who they are outside of the race as well.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I have a question from Mike here. First Mike says congrats, and asks, when they inevitably make a movie about your rise to excellence in the bikepacking world, which actress would you pick to play?
Oh, wow. This is a big question. I don't know. Who comes to mind that would not be a great pick, but it's Reese Witherspoon because she starred in Wild, and I use Wild as a comp title to my book.
Okay.
So that's who comes to mind, but I will have to get back to you on that one. I'll spend a little time brainstorming.
Sure.
I have like a funny but embarrassing story that I could tell. So as an
Please.
yeah. Okay. So as an author, I receive royalties from my books and stuff. And I received a payment in January this year, and it said, your book is being optioned for film. Here's the payment or whatever, because you get paid when this happens. I was like, holy smokes, this is so exciting. So I went around telling everyone my book is being optioned for film. And then I was like, oh, I didn't get my payment for my audiobook. And so I emailed my, publisher, and they checked with the accountant, and they're like, oh, we sent that to you in January. I was like, no, that was for the film optioning. And they're like, oh, we made an administrative error. It's actually supposed to be for the audiobook. It was the wrong code. And so I've been going around telling everyone that my book was being optioned.
Meaghan, let me correct you there. What you've been doing is actually manifesting.
Thanks,
So
Taylor. Thanks.
we're just manifesting the film optioning here.
Thank you. I think, I think it would be great. So I wasn't going to own up to it. I was just going to be like, oh yeah, that film thing never happened. But I clearly am owning up to it now.
But you're not the one that made a mistake. There's nothing embarrassing.
I know, but it's still embarrassing.
Oh my gosh, no. Okay, let's see. Other questions that we have here. Oh, I like this one. Do you feel your confidence in general grew over the season before each successive race? Or did you feel each one needed a completely different approach?
I feel like there was some momentum building for sure. Yeah. And after Atlas, I was in kind of a strange headspace because like I was injured and not feeling great, but I was also kind of like, wow, you did this really hard thing with an injury, and you need to take care of your body, but there's time before Hellenic to do that. So yeah. So it was kind of a strange space, but I was also like very determined, like, cool, what are the next steps to feel better for the next event? And I was able to kind of carry those out and come into Hellenic in a really, really good space. After Hellenic, I think there was some momentum from the success, from, the win there, and excitement about preparing for this final race of the season. I'd taken each race as its own little unit, so I wasn't thinking about Silk Road other than the fact that I signed up and paid my fees for it in January, February. And as that being said, I wasn't thinking about it, but I was trying to make sure I had some energy in the bank or time that I could take off from work to prepare for it, because I knew it would take the most preparation and be the biggest one logistically. So yeah, taking each one as their own thing, trying to build momentum, but also to save some for Silk Road, because I knew it would be just more.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, what I'm hearing from you is not only confidence is surely a relevant part, but your wisdom about listening to the signals of your body. I mean, it can be so hard when you're in pain and injured to trust and believe that you will recover in time for the next big goal, and to differentiate the pain and suffering of an endurance sport that's inevitable with a rugged endurance sport, and the pain and suffering of injury that you really need to pay attention to is so hard. But also the competence that you build through building this experience, it just set you off on this foundation. Huge.
Yeah, I think you put that really well.
Well, is there anything else that you want to kind of share as we sum up in reflection of this huge year?
It's been a journey, and I knew it would be when I signed up for it, but you don't know what that's actually going to play out like until it happens. And I think that's the exciting part of a journey. And that's one of the reasons I love bike packing is you wake up in the morning and you know you're going to go someplace cool, but you don't quite know what that's actually going to look like. And so being there for all those twists and turns has been a really, it's been an exciting and memorable year. And I'm just so excited for all the people who've played a role in it, and brands like Redshift who've supported me in this big dream. I will say that previously, I think I could have done all the races without outside, you know, product and financial support. And I reached a point this year where I needed support from others than myself to pull this off. So I guess I want to acknowledge the roles of of brands and other people in making this year happen for me, because I really couldn't do it alone. So thanks for being part of my community.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, so many of our biggest undertakings require that support system. So it's been a blast to see you experiment through our product lines and, you know, be able to experiment enough to dial in your, you know, rig that was going to support you through super different terrain and really demanding events. And it's been really cool to see like the shock stop system and the cruise control grips like add to your comfort and, you know, your confidence and your just experience in these events. But even more so, it's just a huge honor for Redshift to be able to back and partner with someone like you that brings such a passion and like a sense of purpose to the sport. So I've just really enjoyed getting to know like your unique experience and also be able to share your really powerful voice with our audience. So it means a lot. And I really hope we get to work together and just stay in touch in the future. So speaking of staying in touch, we're going to drop your some of your links and some Redshift resources in the show notes. So please check those out. Make sure you go back and listen to our previous race recaps. And if you want to check out Meaghan's, you know, bike build and any other future updates from events that she's got coming out, please stay in touch with her there. And yeah, thanks everybody again so much for following along.
Thanks, everybody.